Hello, everyone. Welcome to this DPCD update. I'm James Milan, and I am with the director of our Department of excuse me, Planning and Community Development, Jennifer Raitt. Jenny, nice to see you. Thanks for being
Nice to
here.
see you too.
We are talking to you right after the final wrap up of a marathon town meeting, longest that I can remember. And certainly lots and lots of business was done. Lots of that had to do with planning department matters and zoning in particular, and lots of that came in right near the end of the meeting. So please just give us a wrap up from your perspective on the business that got done.
Sure, no problem. Thank you, James. So I will run through zoning items, but there were also town bylaw amendments and a number of resolutions that also relate back to my department, which I'm glad to speak about. On the zoning amendment side, all of the recommended actions of the Arlington Redevelopment Board were the actions that town meeting actually took. So I'll start there. And that includes adopting all of the administrative amendments, updates to our marijuana uses, which will allow for marijuana transport in the community as a new use option within that item in the zoning bylaw. So it's kind of opening up a new side of business related to marijuana uses that is now allowed according to the state. So we align with the state.
And is that,
regulations.
sorry to interject, but do you mean that basically marijuana delivery from local dispensaries is going to be possible now? Is that right? Delivery to people's homes, or?
Yes, that as well as from other communities that currently allow marijuana to Arlington. Yes.
Okay. Thanks for that clarification. Sorry for the interruption.
No problem. It's good to clarify. The other item was obviously industrial uses. We spent some time talking about that over a couple of nights and ended up making an amendment to it based upon a citizen town meeting member petition to amend it to allow for greater height as well as greater floor to area ratio. So a little bit bigger density in the industrial area than what we had proposed. And so that allows for updated industrial uses that are really just more modern uses in the ways that people want to be using their industrial buildings, but have been unable to due to the way that our use table is structured, as well as some opportunities to really create better environmental and design standards in the industrial zone, since a lot of the industrial zone is very tightly knitted in with very residential neighborhoods. We wanted to be sensitive to the type of designs that might come forward as a result of these bylaw changes. And then, of course, the artisan live workspace.
Yeah, I wanted to jump in and I wondered if you could give us an example or two, perhaps, of what you were calling the more modern uses, the things that people want to see these facilities kind of converted into. What kinds of uses are those?
It's everything from breweries to light industrial uses that we don't currently allow, which is different types of manufacturing, light manufacturing, various types of creative production uses that even though we did update our through mixed use, we made some updates. It didn't actually capture all the different types of uses, and that includes things like breweries, which is something that a lot of people have picked up on and gotten a little excited about. But there are other types of uses as well that we did not previously allow as part of our use table in the bylaw, and now we'll allow those types of uses. That it also includes residential uses, which was talked about quite a great deal. The only type of residential use that we now will allow in the industrial zoning districts is an artisan live workspace.
Yes, which we have spoken about before, and I know took up quite a bit of time at town meeting.
Yes, it did.
Is it unusual? I'm sorry, but you started at the outset saying that town meeting had adopted basically with occasional amendments, I guess, all of the recommendations of the board. Is that how things usually go, or is that an unusual development?
I think it's how things tend to go, but usually with a lot of debate and conversation. More so, I've noticed in the last couple of years than in the prior years that I've been working for the town. I don't know about prior to that, but I do think, most, a lot of the conversations that take place leading up to town meeting happen through the public hearings process. And usually a lot of issues are resolved during that time, both in the development of the main motion, as well as sort of the board and staff understanding of any issues that have come up in the community as a result of some of the things that we are proposing that we hadn't considered previously. In this particular situation, I think we had a lot of things come up basically after the public hearings during town meeting. And that made it a little bit more complicated. And of course, I think the added complication was a virtual town meeting where some things were made a little bit more challenging in communications than perhaps they would be if we were in person. But I think that we really, both with the work of town meeting members as well as the redevelopment board and my team, were able to come together really to answer a lot of the questions that had come up during town meeting.
Great. I may have interrupted your flow. Sorry.
That's okay.
I'm an expert at that. That's my main function.
The other piece about industrial uses is all of that came from two different planning processes. So, and this will relate to something that I wanted to talk with you about and the viewers, which is a lot of things that we do related to zoning amendments usually are happening through multiple conversations even prior to the public hearings through some sort of planning process, usually one led by the Department of Planning and Community Development. In the case of the industrial uses, we had talked about those things as part of the Arlington Heights Neighborhood Action Plan. We had also talked about it in relationship to the Millbrook corridor study, and a number of other, the economic analysis of industrial districts. So there had been a lot of conversations, again, leading up to town meeting, but with the pandemic and the levels of participation at times fluctuating, I think that, that was one reason why a number of things had really come up quite a bit during the town meeting itself. But it's wonderful to see that we were successful in bringing those things to fruition and being able to sort of begin to realize those plans. Another plan that sort of seeded one of the zoning amendments was the energy efficient homes. And that one came directly from the Net Zero Action Plan. That was also adopted by town meeting. Another item was the expansion of the parking minimums, the reduction to 0 being allowed through the special permitting process, not by right, in all business districts, where in the fall special town meeting, the redevelopment board had recommended only the B3 and B5 zoning districts, which is really the heart of each one of the distinct business communities in Arlington. It now is applicable to all of the business districts.
And can you explain what you mean by, like, basically you just gave a shorthand version and I am not clear. So I'm just going to ask,
I'm sorry.
What does it mean to go down to, in terms of the parking to go down to 0? What does that mean?
It means that in certain circumstances, particularly when there's sort of the topographical and sort of by nature of the building composition or other, features of a particular site, being able to allow the redevelopment board to make a decision to allow 0 parking at a development or when there's a change of use. That is something that the board was not able to do in the past, except in the B3 and the B5 zoning districts. However, the conditions are the same regardless of the business district, just by the nature of the topography and the types of site conditions that you see along our main corridors in Arlington.
So I assume that the goal there, or at least one of them, is just basically that stipulation as it existed before and without the board being able to do anything about it might have stymied or inhibited some kinds of development or some things that we would like to see, and it was a real obstacle, and you're removing that. Is that at all an accurate reading?
It's now as an option. It certainly will make things a lot more streamlined in terms of permitting, rather than having to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals to file for a variance, which is very difficult to receive. or to go through an extensive permitting process, both with the redevelopment board and the zoning board of appeals, which has happened in a couple of instances. We want to prevent that from moving forward. We want to be business friendly, and part of being business friendly is to recognize that not every instance, and the site conditions don't necessarily allow us to incorporate new parking without significantly restructuring some of the buildings that we truly want to preserve. We would not be able to create new parking opportunities.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Okay, so we also, town meeting overwhelmingly ended up adopting the accessory dwelling unit bylaw, which was after, I believe there were 14 amendments and a substitute motion, all of which did not end up passing. And the original main motion passed, which was also quite successful, I think, in the end.
Can I, sorry, I know I'm doing a lot of this today, but can I just ask you, that sounds unusual to me, to have 14, so many amendments proposed, considered, deliberated, obviously, clarified, and then rejected. Again, just like on the basis of the town meeting experience that you've had over the years that you've been in town, does that happen very, very often, or is that, that's a kind of crazy circumstance there?
Well, I think the last time that, in my own experience with the town, the last time we had that number of amendments or sort of, things that were being proposed at the last minute, or, in the lead up to town meeting, rather, that happened during the recodification, the special town meeting that we held about the zoning recodification. And, I think when people are in need of more information, something needs to be further clarified. People want to understand some of the impacts of different items. That tends to be a time where you end up seeing more zoning amendments being proposed. In this case, and I think that the town moderator did an excellent job of grouping some of the amendments when they were actually discussed during town meeting, because there was a lot of overlap with, in the different groupings of amendments. And some of them were multiple amendments by individuals. So while there were 14, there were some people had filed 3 of the 14. And then the substitute motion was essentially a proposal to bring back the amendment to what had been proposed in 2019 with one minor tweak, which was to allow accessory dwelling units by right rather than by special permit, which was different than what we had proposed in 2019. But in 2019, it also had failed. So that was a bit of a risk to bring up really any of the amendments and the substitute motion. But I think it was a worthwhile discussion for the body of town meeting, and ultimately the decision, had been made to go with the main motion.
Well, I know that just from our conversations over these last months and from other conversations I've had in town, obviously, that both of those were, but by both, I mean both the industrial use changes, especially around, the art and living spaces, and then the accessory dwelling units were what I would call kind of hot button issues here, in that a lot of people had opinions, either well-informed or less well-informed, about what the the nature of those articles would and what the effect of them would be. So in the end, I bet it did take a long time and a lot of discussion, but we're emerging from this town meeting with that business having been taken care of, which sounds like good news to me. I'm sure it is to you. It's got to be a relief. I
think it's excellent news. And I think it's also excellent news, the kinds of statements that were being made by town meeting members with regard to the accessory dwelling unit bylaw, I think speaks quite highly to both the work that the petitioners had done in the lead up to town meeting and frankly, up to the last minute to get ready for that conversation. It speaks a lot to the quality of the work that they had done in the research, and their readiness to really proceed with that kind of proposal. But also, I think it demonstrated that, there's been some really thoughtful conversations happening about that particular type of use. And I think even back from 2019, when it was being considered, a lot of people had supported it. I mean, it was more than a majority who had supported it, but at that point, we needed a supermajority. In this case, we only needed a majority, and actually we ended up receiving 82% of the vote. So it was.
Isn't that just the way things work, right?
Need time to process the proposals and fully consider the details, and it ultimately waited for the best proposal to vote on.
And as you said, people, even the petitioners, those who had brought it forward, most likely did their own homework on the basis of what happened in 2019, and were, as you said, really well prepared for this year. All right, good enough. Anything that we have missed about town meeting?
Yeah, just one other item was that the working with the Disability Commission is something that's really going to be important for the board over this next leading into a future town meeting, where the Disability Commission had proposed a couple of warrant articles. Only one of them ended up proceeding and was also adopted by town meeting, which was an amendment related to enforcement of the zoning bylaw, as well as inclusion of the recognition of the importance of the Americans with Disabilities Act and the Architectural Access Board regulations. And there had been other items that the Disability Commission, I know, will want to continue discussing with the redevelopment board, and future proposals, I'm sure, will be forthcoming. But that was another one that I wanted to mention that also came forward and was adopted.
Is there anything there that we should just make clear to people in any kind of concrete sense of what kind of changes or impact that might have on our visible and experiential space here in town?
I think it's mostly around enforcement and making sure that the buildings that are changed in our built environment, whether they're a new construction or significant rehabilitation, depending upon the threshold that they might be triggering in terms of the amount of the investment into that property, may need to be compliant with certain rules and regulations related to people with disabilities. And it's just important as a statement for the town to make clear to the community that that is not only a value, but it is the law. It's the law. It's also a set of regulations. So I think that is primarily what it is communicating, is to ensure that there's compliance so that people with disabilities and people of all abilities can enjoy our built environments.
Well, I'm sure you would love an opportunity to keep talking about town meeting and just keep the whole memory alive.
It's true. I probably would.
But we will, for everybody's sake, I think at this point, go ahead and put town meeting 2021 to rest, and let's talk about things coming up. You don't get to take much of a breath. That's just the nature of your job and the nature of the way things go here. But there are some important initial stage planning meetings, I think, coming up this week that you want to share with us. That's true.
And there isn't usually much of a break for planning and community development. We are embarking on a project that's a regional project, actually, with Lexington and Concord, to capitalize on the opportunity, the biggest opportunity that we share collectively, which is the Minuteman Bikeway, and to leverage that opportunity and increase the connections of the bikeway to the business community. So Allie Carter in my department is leading an initiative through a local rapid recovery program. It's a grant that we received through the Department of Housing and Community Development to assist Arlington as well as the other communities with a plan that really addresses the issues to increase connectivity of people coming from the bikeway, whether they're pedestrians or bikers, to enjoy and benefit from our local business district. So in Arlington, it's primarily focused around Arlington Heights, and then of course in Lexington and Concord in their respective business districts. And there's a meeting on that. I'm sorry, there's a meeting related to that tomorrow evening.
Right, that's tomorrow. Yes, so Tuesday, June 8th is what we're talking about, I think, right? Yes. Just in case, obviously, people will be hearing this at different times. But is there anything, I understand that this is, again, you may not be able to say anything about what could be expected to come from this, but I am wondering whether there are any ideas that you already know are going to be in play here for how to do what it is that you're talking about, or whether this meeting is really just the beginning of a process and it's a blank slate right now.
It's a bit of a blank slate. I mean, we do have some, I mentioned the Arlington Heights Neighborhood Action Plan before, and that speaks
Hmm.
a little bit to the connectivity issues between the Arlington Heights Business District and the bikeway. But I think that this is really an opportunity to look at sort of how to unite all three communities as part of that planning process. So it is a bit of a fresh start, and
Great.
with the assistance of a consultant who will be helping us to think about the ways to integrate all of that across the three communities.
Well, it sounds very promising, and I'm hoping to speak to Ally Carter from your
Yes.
department sometime soon to flesh things out even further.
Yes,
But
she'll be able to provide you with an update post meeting. And
mhm,
I think, we'll be able to report out some results and things that people are communicating, some preliminary results about existing conditions. And those are the kinds of things that I think people will be able to better understand what we're talking about and where it might go to in the future with the
great.
recommendations. It's
That's
a
great.
very fast turnaround grant because it is meant to be recovery oriented, as in recovery from the pandemic.
From the pandemic. Perfect. I mean, we got to jump on these things, right?
Yes.
They're real opportunities for kind of lasting changes to be made, and so I know that again, this town is well managed, in my opinion, and so this is a good example of us jumping on that opportunity.
Yes,
Um,
and in that particular case, it is meant to be planning to then likely proceed to grants. Writing additional grants for support, whether they're capital or other types of grant programs that the state has lined up, or perhaps aligning with future ARPA, the rescue plan
mhm.
funds that might come to the town related to the business community. So, I mean, this particular project is meant to lead to those next steps.
Right. And so what I hear you saying there is that it sounds like there is a pool or pot of money available, or that we can reasonably rely on, and
Mhm.
we need a planning process in order to be able to make the best use of that.
Right, exactly.
Great. Speaking about the planning process, I think that there are a couple of other
Yes.
things that we've touched on very briefly in the past, but that now things are starting to happen.
Yes, exactly. On Wednesday night, we have the first of our housing forums for the housing production plan process. And I'm really looking forward to both hearing about some of the updates to existing conditions, reporting out on progress that we've made since adopting the 2016 housing production plan, and then beginning to talk about some of the sort of barriers and opportunities and things that people are thinking about essentially in relationship to housing. We've already started, as I think I mentioned in a prior interview with you, a number of conversations with different stakeholders in the community, some focus groups, and there will be quite a bit that the consultant who we've hired, Barrett Planning Group and Horsley Witten Group, will be able to report out on Wednesday night. And there will be also breakout groups for people to have like sort of smaller group discussions to process the information.
So it sounds like that session, and again, that's Wednesday, June 9th, that will be happening or has happened, depending on when you're listening to this. Sounds like there will be an element of that session that is an update, in a sense, of things that have happened since 2016, as you've said, and then a lot of of time will be spent on, looking forward from here,
Yes. Yeah.
as is the planning process, obviously.
Yes. And there will be other opportunities for community meetings for people to attend. So if you miss this one, you haven't missed them all.
Right. This is just the first, and there will be a series, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And
And
then,
finally, how about open space? Yeah.
yes, lastly, we have the open space recreation plan process, which the kickoff meeting is this Thursday evening. And that's Thursday, June 9th.
And all I'll say about that is, or that might be Thursday, June 10th, right? I think that's the 10th. Anyway, all I'll
You're
say
right.
about that is
It is.
is
We're off on our
great.
days. I just meant Thursday.
There you go. So Thursday, June 10th. And I've got to imagine that that's going to be, again, something that the community is highly invested in on the basis, of course, unusual time coming out of the pandemic, et cetera. But I don't think anybody could help but notice how very full our parks and open spaces have been over this last month or months. Certainly I have. I mean, we are making tremendous community use of these spaces at the moment. And so I think, as always, the community will be intent on, what the future holds for us.
Absolutely. And I think that the other piece that we'll see a lot or hear a lot about is people's interest in creating new park opportunities like parklets, pocket parks, things of that nature, which has come up quite a bit during the time that we've had the existing open space recreation plan, but which is not recognized in our current plan. And I think it presents some new opportunities for a different way to think about open space and, sort of smaller, much more modest park opportunities, recreational opportunities, I should say. And so I think that things like that will come up. But yes, I mean, certainly open space and recreation is very important to Arlington. This one is led by the Open Space Committee as well as my department. And they are also working with a consultant who happens to be the same consultant as the sub-consultant on the housing plan, and that's Horsley Witten Group. So the reason I mention that is because really the two plans are going to be very overlapping in terms of when they get to their recommendations and the sort of more thoughtfulness about the integrated strategies of the two plans. So I'm really looking forward to when we get to that part of the project to really hear from people about those two sort of dual considerations, which tend to come together when we're talking about more of our main corridors with new development and open space, but also in our neighborhoods. I think where people, are looking at sort of what are the opportunities to both preserve and protect and conserve our open spaces, but also look at new options, looking at streets differently and lots of other things. So I'm looking forward to both of the planning processes kicking off this week.
Yeah, and I certainly see what you're saying about how they are going to dovetail in a number of ways, and I cannot imagine that there are many people in Arlington who will not be impacted by these plans and the way that they play out in future years. So important stuff for the community, and a first chance for everybody to start to weigh in on the process here. So hopefully, and it won't be as hot to get out and about by Wednesday and Thursday, we hope. So, all right, great. Good luck with that. And again, as you mentioned before, not much of a break in the DPCD world between town meeting and next processes getting going.
Yes.
But all right, well, we wish you best of luck in marshaling your own energy.
Thank you.
Thanks for your own efforts. I'm sure you expended quite a bit in terms of town meeting itself. So thanks for that. And thanks for taking the time today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
I have been speaking with Jennifer Raitt, who is, of course, the director of our Department of Planning and Community Development. This is the DPCD update. I am James Millan, and we appreciate your being here, and we'll see you next time.